Hi, we're back with another podcast, and during the recording I forgot to say how much we appreciate all the many comments we receive from listeners and how much I appreciate both that and your support of West London Sport in general. Now going forward, I'd really like to get listeners more involved in terms of deciding the topics we cover. So if you've any views you want to share, anything you think we ought to discuss or give some answers on, maybe you have a question you'd like answered, feel free to let us know on Twitter/X at West London Sport or email feedback@westlondonsport.com. That's feedback@westlondonsport.com. Also, when talking about our old friend Eze, I say he was sold a year ago when I meant to say a year later. I was talking about initial interest from clubs when he was doing well at QPR. Anyway, here's the actual pod. I hope it's a decent listen for you. Hello and welcome to the West London Sport QPR podcast with me, David McIntyre, joined by Kevin Gallen, the former MK Don striker. As usual, Kevin, who tomorrow is going to be heading to Ireland, where I am now. And Kev, you'll be absolutely shocked to hear that it's been raining in Ireland very heavily all day.
Why am I not surprised with that weather report? I have packed my wind sheeter, umbrella, anything else, maybe my wellies. Nothing's that has not surprised me one bit. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to a wedding to my friend who's a QPR fan, Pat Ryan. His uncle and his dad. I've got season tickets in the loft. So, hopefully going to have a great time.
Nice one. No news, concrete news anyway, on the head coach situation. That might actually have changed by the time you hear this, depending on when it goes out. We're recording it on Wednesday, but at the moment there is nothing concrete. We're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about Espanyol being interested in Jonathan Varane, which is a story that some of you might have seen, and also the situation with Ben Williams, which again, most of you will know a little bit about that situation. If not, then I will explain some context when we come to it. But Varane first, Espanyol then, interested in taking him back to Spain, where of course he played before joining QPR a year or so ago. They have made an approach for him. It's not been turned down as such as of this moment, but I think it will be. Espanyol seem to be kind of talking in the £4 or £5 million bracket, which is not what QPR value him at. What should he be valued at, Kev? Is he a player Rangers should be looking for big money for? Or would you be inclined to maybe sell sooner rather than later?
That's a good question. Based on performances this last season, I think that's a very generous offer, if I'm being honest. He had some good games, and he had some very poor games and average games. When he played in the holding midfield role, he was good at the defensive side of the game, sitting in front of the back four and protecting them. But what I thought he really struggled with and needs to improve is when QPR decided to, when the team decided to play out from the back from the goalkeeper, and you have that sort of anchor role, the playmaker, or what you call what's that word in American football, the quarterback role, where that holding midfielder has to come really deep to the edge of the box and try and link the play and start the play and start the attack. I thought he definitely needs improve. That his game in that situation needs improving. And I used to, sort of have watching QPR have heart attacks when the ball came into him because he never sort of really looked over his shoulder to see if anyone was on him. And the majority of his passes was always backwards and sideways. Now, are they looking Espanyol or even QPR? Maybe they're looking for Varane to maybe be more of a box-to-box running midfield player because his athleticism is very good, rather than being that holding midfielder player where he is good at the defensive side and blocking. But I always believe that's quite a sort of not an easy job. You have to have good discipline for that. But a job where you're just sitting in front of the back four and helping them out. But playing out from the back, I thought QPR really struggled last year when we tried to do it. And there was many a time where the manager, Cervantes at the time, scrapped that idea and went long and played off the second balls and went more direct, because I think he realised that the players that he had could not do that. And when he did try to do it at the last 4 or 5 games of the season, Colback came into that position and had more ability and awareness to play that sort of passing out from the back. So whether Espanyol are going to come back with another bid or QPR will accept it, it's a difficult one. They probably he's just signed a new contract. QPR probably think that there's potential there to improve and to develop, and Espanyol obviously think that. So it's a difficult one to see what the club feel. Maybe the club feel that they've got the best out of him and they've made a profit and can go and spend that money on different players who they have identified to come in and progress the club and take the club nearer the top of the table.
It's about that potential, though, isn't it, Kev? That possible development potential. Is it there? I mean, he's a good age. He's only just completed his first season in English football. He did have a bit of a ropey start, but he's got some momentum. So I suppose the issue is, whatever his value might be now, what might it be in a year or so?
Well, yeah, and I agree, and I see Espanyol will be probably looking at the physicality side of his game, and they'll be probably thinking we can develop him technically, improve his awareness, improve his passing skills, and with the athleticism, he could be a lot better. He has potential to develop and to be a better player, and a player that will demand more money for his signature in the future. That's what they're probably. Is it a gamble? Maybe. Is it a gamble QPR selling him and maybe getting a sell-on clause? There's all different scenarios. So it'd be interesting to see what happens in the next few weeks.
I mean, in the past with these cases, Kev, I've tended to piss a lot of the fans off, really, by saying that I'd look to sell sooner rather than later. I said it with Luke Freeman, Alex Smithies, even Charlie Austin. Got a lot of irate responses for that, and I understand why. But I do think what happened in those cases did prove my point a bit. And more recently, I felt more should have been done to sell the likes of Dickey, Willock, and Chair too. I have to say, the one exception was Eze. I think where my view from when Palace and others first started showing some interest was, look, anything less than 10 million, put the phone down on them. And a year or so ago, of course, when he eventually went, it was for more than that. But in the end, I'd be a lot less ambitious than QPR have been in terms of getting fees. And one of the factors in that is a financial one, and I think often that's overlooked. That it's not just about what a player's worth; it's also about a club's ability to command, the kind of money that you might want. Rangers need the money. They needed the money in the past when other players were potentially there to be sold. If you look at Brentford, they'll get top dollar for at least one player again this summer, which they've done consistently. And why do they do that? Well, they do it because they've sold players before, so they're able to say to buying clubs, well, look, we don't need the money. That we're flushed because we've sold X, Y, and Z. So if you want this player, you're going to have to pay a damn good price for him. And you have to start from somewhere. QPR aren't at that stage. They're nowhere near it. Brentford did lose players along the way, like Adam Forshaw, Stuart Dallas, Daniel Bentley, and others. And they built themselves up to the point, a little bit like Burnley, who lost Charlie Austin to QPR along the way. These clubs you've got to reach the point where you can sell for, decent money rather than slightly disappointing money. So I tend to sell earlier rather than later. I think it makes more sense to bank more money as quickly as you can, and then try to improve your situation and put yourself in a position where in the future you can look for, better transfer fees. I'm not saying that with regard to Varane, because I think that it's difficult to tell whether his value will go up significantly or not. But I think, in general, unfortunately, QPR are still in a position, Kev, where other clubs know they need the money, and that comes into it, right?
Oh no, 100%, and it's a very good point. The saying "strike where the iron's hot" and stuff is. I totally agree. There's different arguments whether the club trusts the next manager to develop him even more and get more money and play him every week, or get the money and reinvest straight away and try and improve the team that way. So it's like I said a couple of minutes ago, it's a tough decision for the board to make. And I totally agree. Both sides develop with us for another season or two, and hopefully get more money, and hopefully he can play better and double the fee, or sell while the iron's hot. I wouldn't, I wouldn't be against both aspects. It's a really tough decision.
Sorry, Kev. Is he a better defensive midfielder than Sam Field, in your opinion?
Well, they're different. I actually think people say box to Sam Field, box to box, and I don't think that's his game. I think he's more of a holder. I do think he can progress the ball better than Varane at the moment. Not to say that can't change, and maybe they can switch sort of roles, and Varane can be the more runner on and using his power and strength, a more sort of box to box type midfield role. Who knows? But there was clips of Varane against Sunderland when he done that for the goal, for the winning goal, where he broke from midfield and went past a few players, laid it wide, and ball comes in the box and Maddison scores. So maybe that might be something for the new manager, whoever he is, to look at. But for me, I don't think Field is a box to box type midfielder. I think he's more of a holder, protector, keeps possession with short, safe, accurate passes. He's not a player who's going to spread the play and fire those intricate through balls. That's not his game. He hasn't got that in his locker. But as a holding midfielder, protecting the back four, he's got the size, for winning headers. Maybe there might be if Varane stays, there might be a switch in that situation, in that formation, in that tactic next season.
On to Ben Williams before we finish, Kev, because I do want to get your thoughts on that. This has been a pretty controversial topic, as many will know. For others who don't, Ben Williams was brought to QPR as Director of Performance during the summer of 2023, so 2 years ago, and he became a really, really important figure. Really, he came in the context of the club having had seasons really blighted by injuries to players, as many will remember, and his job was to oversee the club's sports science, the physiotherapy, medical and nutrition, those departments, and what followed was actually quite a vast improvement in terms of player availability. He then got a job as I think the title was Director of High Performance with the Brooklyn Nets of the NBA. And he continued to work for QPR on a consultancy basis. Now, this led to a bit of a shitstorm, really, because as we all know, Rangers last season were again absolutely plagued by injuries, and the obvious thing to look at there really was the absence, or at least physical absence, of Ben Williams. Now he is coming back to work full time, based at QPR from this summer. So that situation is being resolved. A lot of people have got an opinion on this, Kev. You and I have talked about it before. What do you think?
Well, first things first. I find it last season's situation ridiculous, because if you have a director or whatever, a performance, and he's working for a basketball team in New York, so basically sharing his 50, well, he might 50% of his time with them, 50% of his time with QPR. It might be 60%, 60-40 in theirs. It could be 60-40 in ours, but you're still not giving 100%. And knowing football players and being in football as a player, you don't want to give anyone, any football player, excuses, especially when things are going bad, where the manager or the people at the club or the physio will say to a player, you haven't done this, you haven't done that. And then that player can just turn around and go, well, what are you talking about? Our director of performance isn't even here. He's in America, he's in New York, or wherever he is. He isn't even here. He comes in once a month or twice a month. You just cannot give football players any, because I've been there, I've done it. You cannot give football players any excuse to moan or to say this ain't right, especially when things ain't going right. And at the start of the season, let's be fair, that things weren't going right. It was a very poor start to the season, and you can't have with injuries. And I'm glad it's been resolved. That's all I'm saying. I just actually think it's a shambolic situation last season. Now it's been resolved and he's come back. Hopefully, he's good at his job. And we had a lot of injuries last season, a lot of muscle injuries, and hopefully that can be rectified, because there's nothing worse when you have your best players or any players not on the pitch, especially if you're the chairman and you're paying someone thousands of pounds a week, and they're not on the pitch. That's not a good thing, and that is, it's like you buy a house and you can't live in it. Whatever, the situation is just unbelievable, where your director of performance is not even in the country or in the continent. So thank God it's been resolved, and hopefully he can get on with the job and give 100% to that job, because you can't have that again.
Yeah, I mean, as is always the case, I see this a lot where, the club and people running the club often get praise or blame that they don't deserve. But and a lot of the Ben Williams stuff, there is a misperception there in a number of ways about what's actually happened. But I think that, broadly speaking, people who are unhappy about this are absolutely right. I really do think it's been a really, really bad misstep by the club, this one. I mean, the thing is, you've referred a couple of times, Kev, to his role, and the point is that he effectively, the guy did a good job for a year. He got a lot of credit, and what essentially happened was that he got another job, and a good job, and a good opportunity, which he was able to take. And the club decided, and I think this is arguably a legitimate thing to do, that because he'd done a good job, rather than cut ties with him, what they do was that they would keep him on as a consultant. So they would essentially, I suppose in theory, keep his expertise to some extent, rather than let it go completely. Now, but the problem is that title that you referred to, he continued to hold. And I don't know why QPR allowed that perception to persist, because what happened was that he got another job and he was retained on a consultancy basis, which makes his lack of physical presence arguably a little bit more forgivable. It's not, but QPR have allowed this kind of perception that somehow the physio is lording it up somewhere on another gig and is, having treatment applied to players via Zoom, and that's not been the case at all. Now, that isn't a defence of QPR. I'm not defending Rangers on that. That's a sign of how shambolic the situation has been, and how they've allowed this perception to take hold. I don't know why they just didn't make it what they've done clearer. But he is coming back, and I suppose, look, I think it's something QPR need to learn from, really genuinely learn from, because it has been a mistake. Best case scenario, if this happens, is that, further down the line, QPR are seen as having progressed in all the areas that he oversees, and that it's felt that the club were right in 2024 to have allowed him to take the opportunity that they did and kept him on board. And in the longer term, that seems a less ridiculous decision. But really, that has to happen for what they've done to be justified, because it has just been a complete catastrophe. And people are entitled to say, look, the guy comes in, there's a radical reduction in the number of injuries. He's then not working at the club physically. And there are injuries left, right, and centre. Is that just a coincidence? It doesn't seem likely that it's just a coincidence, does it? So, but anyway, like you said, he's back. We'll, I think, probably find out now how good the guy is. But I think you nailed it there, Kev, when you said, and you're absolutely right. And I was actually going to say that to you, and it was quite honest of you to say it, that you can't give players any excuse. And that happens in dressing rooms all the time, doesn't it? This gets thrown in the face of anyone who criticises players. And it's that perception of this malaise and low standards, the idea that someone can hold a job like that but be working somewhere else. It's horrendous. I mean, can something like that ever work? Have you ever known anything like that, first of all, Kev? And could it work?
I've never known anything like that. I've never known anything like that. And the thing is, QPR should have just took his title away as what was his title?
So the title, the title was Director of Performance, which, as you said, if it had not retained that, then maybe it would have been clearer about what actually happened. But yeah, that was the title, Director of Performance.
Well, they should have they should have took that Director of Performance away from him when he wanted to go to Brooklyn Nets, and just put down Ben Williams, consultant. That's it.
Yeah.
And then no one will be talking about this. So very, very naive. I don't know what the word is, naive, but that can't happen again, because, like I said, you give the players an excuse, but you're also giving your fans something to criticise when things are going wrong. And when there's injuries, and you're saying, "Oh, our Director of Performance is sharing a job with the Brooklyn Nets," that just can't happen, and it shouldn't happen, and it can't happen again.
Agreed, mate. Agreed. We'll leave it there for now, but we will hopefully have another podcast soon, and by then QPR will have a new head coach, so we'll be talking about that. But in the meantime, thanks a lot, Kev. Enjoy Ireland. Make sure you take that umbrella.